My dad chose my stepmom over walking me down the aisle, but the text message I found on his phone after the funeral revealed a secret that shattered our family forever. I always thought the biggest betrayal of my life would be my dad missing my wedding. I was naively, foolishly wrong. The real betrayal was a corrosive, slow-acting poison administered over 15 years. So much darker and more calculated that the wedding drama now feels like a mere symptom of the disease, not the disease itself. My name is Taylor. For 30 years, my identity was inextricably linked to being Robert's daughter. He was my hero, my anchor in the chaotic sea of childhood. When my parents' divorce finalized when I was 8, he didn't just become a weekend dad. He became my co-pilot. He coached my soccer team, helped me build dioramas for history class, and taught me how to change a tire, all with a patience that seemed infinite. Then when I was 12, the sea itself changed. He met Amy. She was a force of nature, charming, whip-smart, with a laugh that could light up a room. She had a daughter, Ezra, who was 10, a delicate girl with wide, observant eyes. On the surface it was a fairy tale. A ready-made family, a fresh start for my dad. But fairy tales have villains, and I was too young to recognize that the villain isn't always the one with the obvious scowl. The poison was subtle, a sweet-tasting toxin. Amy never yelled, never issued direct commands. Instead, she was a master architect of perception. She built a narrative brick by brick, where Ezra was the golden child, perpetually sunny and graceful, and I was the brooding, difficult teenager, a storm cloud threatening their perfect new life. "Oh, don't worry about Taylor," she'd say to my dad with a sympathetic, weary sigh when I was rightfully upset about being excluded from a planned trip to the mall. "She's just having a hard time adjusting. It's so tough on a girl her age. Ezra is so much more easygoing, thank goodness. She's just resilient like that." My dad, a man desperate for peace and terrified of another failed relationship, bought the narrative wholesale. He began to see me through Amy's carefully crafted lens. My normal teenage frustrations became acting out. My quiet independence was labeled sullenness. My achievements, making the honor roll, winning a science fair, were met with a brief, "That's great, kiddo," while Ezra's participation in a school play was celebrated with flowers and a family dinner at the fanciest restaurant in town. The pattern didn't just continue into adulthood, it calcified. Ezra's college graduation was a lavish, garden party affair with 100 guests. Mine was a quiet, slightly awkward dinner at a chain restaurant where the conversation repeatedly circled back to Ezra's new internship. Ezra got a brand new cherry red convertible for her 21st birthday. I received a thoughtful but impersonal gift card to a home goods store. I told myself it didn't matter. I was building my own life, one brick at a time, independent of their approval. I found a career I loved, made friends who became my chosen family, and then I met Nomad. He was my calm harbor. When he proposed on a windswept beach at sunset, the joy felt pure, untarnished by my family history. I called my dad first. His voice cracked with what sounded like genuine emotion. "I'm so happy for you, sweetheart. I can't wait to walk you down the aisle." Nomad's a lucky man. For the first time in over a decade, a dam of hope broke inside me. Maybe this was the moment. Maybe seeing me as a bride would remind him of the little girl he used to coach on the soccer field. That hope was systematically dismantled when Ezra got engaged 3 months later. It was as if my wedding vanished from the collective family memory. Every phone call, every visit, became a planning session for Ezra's extravaganza. Her wedding was a masterpiece of excess. A cathedral venue, a 12-tier cake, a guest list that resembled a small town's population. My dad, dressed in a tuxedo that cost more than my monthly rent, beamed with an pride I hadn't seen on his face in years as he walked a radiant Ezra down the aisle. He gave a speech that brought tears to everyone's eyes, talking about Ezra's beautiful spirit and how proud Mark, her late father, would have been. I sat at my table, a ghost at the feast, smiling until my cheeks ached, dying a little inside. 6 months later, as my own simpler, heartfelt wedding approached, My dad delivered the killing blow. In a phone call that started with strained pleasantries, he finally choked out the truth. Amy had issued an ultimatum. If he walked me down the aisle, she would leave him. Her reasoning was a masterpiece of manipulation. It was disrespectful to Ezra's memory. It would steal her thunder. It was a deliberate attempt to undermine their family's happiness. And my dad, my weak, conflict-averse, people-pleasing dad, folded. He chose her. The confrontation that followed was a raw, painful scream into a void. I didn't just cry, I roared. I listed every slight, every missed school play, every birthday overshadowed by Ezra's whims. I told him that if he didn't come, he was dead to me. He cried, he begged for understanding, he said he was trapped. But he didn't change his mind. He offered a compromise. He would attend as a guest but not walk me. It was the ultimate insult. I hung up on him. I walked myself down the aisle at my beautiful sun-drenched wedding. Nomad's face, filled with so much love and pride, was my anchor. My mom held my hand tightly before I took the first step. It was a day of profound joy, but it was also a funeral for the father I had loved and lost long before his heart stopped beating. I blocked his number, and with Nomad's unwavering support, I began the painful process of moving on. The hurt was a constant low-grade hum in the background of my new married life. Then 3 months later the call came. It was Amy, her voice unnervingly flat. Robert was gone. A massive heart attack, swift and silent. The world didn't just tilt, it shattered. The anger, the hurt, the thousands of words left unsaid, it all vaporized into a howling grief. The finality was a physical weight on my chest. Against every instinct of self-preservation, and with Nomad holding my hand the entire time, I went to the funeral. The atmosphere in the church was thick with a performative grief that felt alien to me. Amy played the devastated widow to perfection, a black veil obscuring her face, her shoulders shaking with sobs that never quite reached her eyes. Ezra, pale and shattered, clung to her mother's arm. I sat in the back row, an outsider mourning a stranger who shared my DNA. I was an orphan in every way that mattered. After the service, at the reception in the house I had grown up in, a place that now felt like a museum of a life I'd been erased from, I needed to escape. I needed a piece of him, something real. I slipped away from the hushed conversations and plates of cold cuts and made my way to his home office. It was the one room Amy had never fully redecorated. It still smelled like him, like old books would polish and his familiar cologne. The grief hit me anew, a suffocating wave. I sat in his worn leather chair, running my hands over the desk. In the bottom drawer, tucked beneath a thick folder of old tax documents, my fingers brushed against cold, hard plastic. It was his old, pre-smartphone burner phone, the one he used for fishing trips and kept, as he'd always said, for emergencies. A relic. On a whim, a desperate need for any connection, I pressed the power button. The screen glowed weakly, the battery icon was flashing red. But it worked. My breath caught as I navigated to the messages. There was only one number that had texted it in the last 6 months. The messages were cryptic, sporadic, but they formed a terrifying narrative. 1 month before my wedding. Robert, we need to talk. It's urgent. The money is gone. He's gone. I'm scared. 1 week after my wedding. Did you tell her? Does she know? Amy is asking questions. I think she suspects something. The day before he died. I can't live with this secret anymore. I'm coming over tomorrow. We have to tell Taylor everything. It's not fair to her. The number wasn't saved. Ice water flooded my veins. Gone. Tell me what? This wasn't the communication of a weak man having an affair. This was the language of fear and conspiracy. I frantically scrolled through the call log. A handful of short, frantic calls from the same number. With fingers trembling so violently I almost dropped the phone, I highlighted the number and pressed call. It rang twice. A woman's voice answered, strained, tired, edged with panic. Robert? Thank God. I've been so worried. Bob, did you talk to her? It wasn't Amy. It was a voice I hadn't heard in over a decade, but one etched into my memory from childhood summers. It was Sarah, my mother's younger sister. My Aunt Sarah. The free spirit, the artist who had a falling out with my mom over something vague and dramatic and had moved across the country, her visits becoming rarer until they stopped altogether. Why was my dad secretly communicating with my estranged aunt about a secret that involved me? Aunt Sarah. I whispered, the words scraping my throat raw. It's Taylor. A sharp, horrified intake of breath. Taylor? Oh honey. Oh no. I'm so sorry about your dad. A long pause filled with the sound of her trying to collect herself. Is this his phone? The old one? Oh God. You weren't supposed to find out this way. Not like this. Find out what? I demanded, my voice rising, the grief momentarily shoved aside by a surge of adrenaline. What's going on? What secret? What money is gone? Not over the phone, Taylor. It's not safe. It's a long story. A terrible story. Can we meet? Somewhere neutral? You deserve to know the truth. The whole, ugly, devastating truth. We agreed on a quiet cafe in a town halfway between our homes. The 24 hours I waited were agony. Nomad held me as I vacillated between wild theories. Had he been involved in something illegal? Was he in debt to dangerous people? Was Sarah involved? He urged caution but supported my need for answers. Sarah was already there when I arrived, nursing a cup of tea. She looked older than I remembered, her face lined with a weariness that went beyond grief. Her eyes, so like my mother's, were red-rimmed but clear. She stood and enveloped me in a tight, desperate hug. When we sat, she took both my hands in hers, her grip firm. First, she began, her voice low and intense, you have to believe this. Your dad loved you more than anything in this world. More than his own life. Everything he did, especially the things that hurt you the most, he did because he thought he was protecting you. He was living a nightmare, Taylor. Protecting me from what? From Amy's petty jealousy. From the truth about who Amy really is, she said, her eyes locking with mine. Taylor, Amy didn't just happen to marry your dad. He targeted him. Their entire marriage was a lie. It was all a long, calculated plan of revenge. She then laid out a story so bizarre and sinister it felt like I'd stumbled into a film noir. Years before my parents' divorce, my dad and his college best friend Mark had a dream. They started a small, innovative tech company in our garage. It was a side project, a passion. Then they caught a break. A major investor was interested. The night they were supposed to meet him, Mark never showed up. He was killed in a hit-and-run accident a mile from the meeting spot. The police ruled it an accident, a rainy night, a sharp curve. But my dad was destroyed by guilt and grief. He blamed himself for pushing the meeting. He abandoned the company and the investor vanished. What does this have to do with Amy? I asked, my mind reeling, trying to connect these ancient dots to my present pain. Everything, Sarah said, leaning forward. Mark wasn't just your dad's business partner and friend. He was Amy's husband. Ezra's father. The floor dropped out from under me. The air left my lungs. What? But Ezra, she never said. Because Amy never told her the full truth. She told Ezra her father died a hero, not that he was killed in a mundane accident. Amy always blamed your dad for Mark's death. She believed, in her twisted grief, that if your dad hadn't been so ambitious, so eager for that meeting, Mark would still be alive. It was irrational, but her grief festered into something poisonous. She vowed to make your dad pay. She spent years planning it. She orchestrated their chance meeting at a charity auction. She studied him, learned what he wanted, and made herself into it. She made him fall in love with her. Her entire goal was to isolate him emotionally and financially, and make him as miserable as she was. To destroy him from the inside out. I felt physically ill. The 15 years of subtle put-downs, the systematic alienation, the constant positioning of Ezra over me. It wasn't just the behavior of a selfish woman. It was a cold, long-term campaign of psychological warfare. My childhood was a battlefield and I never even knew I was a soldier. The money in the texts? I asked, my voice a hoarse whisper. The company idea, Sarah explained, the one your dad and Mark worked on? It was the precursor to a now ubiquitous navigation app. The patent was in both their names. It was sold 5 years ago for a sum I can't even say out loud without feeling dizzy. As Mark's sole heir, Amy was legally entitled to half. But your dad was brilliant, but he was also paranoid, and by then he suspected Amy's motives. He knew if she got her hands on your entire inheritance she would vanish and you'd get nothing. So he secretly contested the patent payout, arguing his continued, solo development of the concept post Mark's death entitled him to a larger share. He won. And he had been quietly funneling your share, millions, Taylor, into a blind trust fund for you since you turned 18. He managed it himself through shell companies. He was trying to protect your future. He pretended to be weak, to be under her thumb, to be the henpecked husband to keep her from getting suspicious. He thought if he played the fool she'd never look too closely. The pieces of the puzzle, the pieces of my broken life, began to click into place with a series of sickening, thunderous cracks. His appeasement wasn't just weakness. It was a desperate, deeply flawed strategy. A performance. He thought he was playing a long game to secure my future. Missing your wedding, Sarah continued, her eyes welling up. Taylor, that was the hardest thing he ever had to do. He called me that night, sobbing. He believed that if he defied Amy on something that public, something that would humiliate her so profoundly, she would hire a forensic accountant. She would tear their financial lives apart until she found the trust fund. He was going to tell you everything. He was gathering evidence, building a case. He was going to leave her, expose her, and give you your life back free and clear. He was waiting for one final piece. The text said the money was gone. I pressed, the horror mounting. And he is gone. Who? Sarah's face collapsed into despair. That's the final, cruelest piece. I was helping him. We had found a witness to the hit and run, a man who was walking his dog that night. He saw more than the police report indicated. He saw the car swerve. And for years he'd been blackmailing Amy. That's who he is. We tracked him down. We were going to offer him a deal. Immunity and a payment from the trust fund in exchange for his sworn testimony about what he saw. We were going to use it to not only expose Amy's manipulation but also to reopen the investigation into Mark's death. We met him a month before your wedding. He took an initial payment from the trust fund, a show of good faith, and promised to bring the evidence. He disappeared. The money was gone. And we feared Amy had found out and silenced him. Your dad was trying to find him to get the money back to fix it before Amy realized what we were doing and the whole house of cards came down on top of you. I sat in that cafe booth numb to my very core. My dad hadn't abandoned me. He had been a prisoner in a gilded cage of his own making, trying to atone for a crime he didn't commit, trying to protect the daughter he loved from a predator he had unknowingly let into their lives. His refusal to come to my wedding, the act that broke me, was his final tragic sacrifice. He chose to let me hate him to keep me safe. The grief that followed was complex, a tangled knot of sorrow, rage, and a devastating posthumous pride. I couldn't let it end there. With Sarah's help and Nomad's steadfast presence, we went to the police. We presented the cryptic texts, Sarah's testimony, and the records of the massive, suspicious transfer from the trust fund. It was enough to reopen the cold case of Mark's death. The investigation unfolded like a slow-burn thriller. The blackmailer was found living lavishly in another state. Facing charges of extortion and fraud, he rolled over on Amy immediately. He had indeed seen her behind the wheel that night, arguing with Mark before the car swerved. It wasn't a clear-cut murder, but it was vehicular manslaughter at best and a cover-up that spanned decades. The financial records provided a paper trail of her systematic draining of my dad's assets, which she had begun long before the patent payout. Amy was arrested at her sister's house, charged with manslaughter, perverting the course of justice and multiple counts of fraud. The media circus was brutal. Headlines screamed about the Black Widow stepmom. Ezra's world imploded. Her mother was revealed as a murderer and a con artist, her entire life a lie constructed on a foundation of vengeance. To her credit, she reached out to me not with the old jealousy but with a shared, stunned devastation. We were both orphans of the same war, casualties of Amy's poison. In the end, I got a form of justice, but it was a hollow victory. The money, what was left of it, was tied up in legal proceedings for years. I didn't care. I had my dad back, but only as a tragic heroic figure in a story I learned too late. The man I had spent years resenting was a martyr. Nomad and I used our own savings, the ones we'd scraped together for our future, to buy a small house by the sea, a fresh start far from the ghosts that haunted my hometown. Sometimes, on the anniversary of his death or my wedding, I take out that old, dead burner phone. I can't turn it on, but I hold it. Those texts are a permanent, painful testament to a love so profound it was willing to be misunderstood, to be vilified, to be remembered as a failure, all to keep me safe. My dad didn't walk me down the aisle, but he walked through hell for me. And that, I have come to understand, is a father's love that transcends any walk down any aisle. It was a love that was strong enough to bear my hatred, and that is a legacy more powerful than any inheritance.